Welcome to the X Crimes. Today, we are opening the book on a case that, well, it's one of the most polarizing and emotionally charged criminal cases in recent American memory.
It really is. This is a story that just consumed the entire nation. It launched so many debates about, parental responsibility, about pathological deception.
And about that terrifying gap between a public persona and what's really happening behind closed doors, the material we've gathered today really concerns the precise origins of that deception.
Right. We're looking at the initial events of a disappearance that baffled investigators and, frankly, the public for years.
So our mission today is to really analyze that foundational source material.
Exactly. We're talking about the convoluted family history, the development of the primary personality involved, and that absolutely critical first month of the disappearance.
We really need to meticulously understand the unstable, toxic ground upon which this entire complex case was built.
That's the key. By examining the patterns of avoidance, of control, and of lying that were established long before any formal investigation began, you can start to contextualize the shocking timeline of events that follows.
And we want to be abundantly clear with you, this is only the first part of this deep dive.
Oh, absolutely. The story is just so dense. It's layered with financial chaos, with these outright theatrical lies.
So today, we're focusing solely on the context leading up to the official police involvement and that initial arrest. We're looking for the why and how the conditions were set for something like this to even occur.
Okay, let's get into it.
Let's unpack this foundational dynamic. We have to start right at the beginning with the parents, George and Cindy Anthony.
Right. So George was born in 1951 in Warren, Ohio.
And his first marriage, that was to a woman named Terry. And the sources are pretty clear that this marriage was, it was born out of obligation.
It was. They married because Terry became pregnant right after high school graduation. But tragically, that pregnancy did not continue.
And that fact alone is so crucial, isn't it? The sources suggest George felt incredibly frustrated by this.
Deeply frustrated. He went into marriage not for love, not for partnership, but because of a child that was on the way.
Which means the foundation was just fundamentally unstable. It was a transactional agreement that, evaporated almost immediately.
It did. Sometime later, George meets Cindy, who was a nurse.
This happened while George was visiting his sister in the hospital. And the source material is very explicit about this.
Yes. They began a relationship while George was still married to Terry. And Cindy knew. She was fully aware of his marital status at the time.
So right there, at the very start of their relationship, you have this pattern of disregarding marital fidelity, of boundary violations.
And what's so fascinating here, and what really establishes George's defining character trait, which is this extreme avoidance and deep dishonesty, is how that first marriage ended.
It's just unbelievable.
George filed for divorce without ever saying a single word to Terry.
She found out in, the most shocking way possible. A friend saw the legal notice printed in the local newspaper.
Right, in the legal section. You have to remember, back then, that was standard legal procedure. A public announcement was how it was done.
I just can't imagine that moment. Your friend sees this legal clipping, realizes your husband has started divorce proceedings, and has to be the one to tell you.
She didn't learn about the end of her marriage from her husband. She learned it from a newspaper clipping, from a third party.
The betrayal in that action is profound.
It is. It demonstrates George's absolute inability to face difficult conversations. He chose total evasion, total deception over any kind of confrontation.
And Terry later gave an assessment of George that really sets the template for this whole family dynamic.
She did. She claimed he was a compulsive liar and famously said she never heard a single truth from him throughout their entire relationship.
So this pattern of deep, ingrained, reflexive deception, this is the very root of the family tree we're looking at today.
It absolutely is. So after the divorce, George marries Cindy. They have 2 children, Lee and Casey.
And for about 10 years, George worked as a police officer in Ohio. The sources say he genuinely loved that job.
But then, in 1985, Cindy decides she wants a change. She wants to quit her nursing job to stay home with the kids.
And this seems to be where Cindy's need for control really starts to dominate their life.
It is. She pressured George to leave the police force. And you have to understand, that job was George's identity. It was his authority, his sense of structure.
And now it was gone. Cindy convinced him to go work at her father's used car lot, arguing he'd make more money.
The sources are very clear on this. Leaving the police force devastated George emotionally. He felt emasculated. He lost his primary source of self-worth, and he sacrificed it for what Cindy wanted.
And that emotional devastation, combined with this new power imbalance, it kind of explains Cindy's persona, doesn't it?
It does. She was known as being extremely persuasive, often controlling, and just notorious for always getting her way.
The sources note that people were genuinely afraid to upset her. They were afraid to tell her anything negative she didn't want to hear because of the force of her personality.
So the entire household started operating on this system where George lied to avoid her wrath, and, other people just kept quiet to avoid a fight.
But the career sacrifice had this swift and devastating financial fallout.
Oh, completely. George was just temperamentally unsuited to working for his in-laws. There were constant fights. He was eventually fired from the car lot.
Then he tried opening his own used car business, right?
He did, and it failed miserably.
Yeah.
It plunged the family into bankruptcy, and they lost their home.
And here's where the paradox of their marriage just crystallizes. Cindy was completely shocked by the bankruptcy.
She had no idea. She had absolutely no clue how dire their financial situation was because George had successfully kept her completely in the dark.
So wait a minute. If George is this compulsive liar who operates through avoidance, and Cindy is this extreme controller who actively prevents reality from entering her world, they're like disastrously perfect complements to each other.
That is precisely the insight we have to take away from this. George knew he couldn't tell her the truth without facing an explosion, so he lied. This is not solid ground for raising children. You have George, the compulsive liar, operating through deception, eroding all trust.
And you have Cindy, the control specialist, who actively resists hearing anything she doesn't want to know. And by doing that, she's actively enabling the deception.
This combination, a relentless need to lie, meeting an active resistance to the truth, it created this unstable, explosive foundation. The children, especially Caylee, were just destined to learn that objective reality is optional.
That it's negotiable and often secondary to just preserving whatever the preferred family narrative is at the moment.
Right. They moved to Orlando in 1989. Cindy became the primary breadwinner, working these exhausting shifts as a nurse.
And George just sort of drifted between low-level jobs, perpetually lying, financially irresponsible, and just further eroding the patience of the person who was keeping the family afloat.
It was an environment built on transaction and denial from the very beginning.
So with that background established, let's pivot to their daughter, Caylee.
Right. And understanding her specific personality isn't about, character assassination. It is absolutely essential.
Because her particular method of operation, her conflict style, her relationship with truth, it plays a direct and undeniable role in the shocking events that follow.
It does. The source material paints this picture of a child who is just academically uninterested. Classes didn't appeal to her, not even on a basic level.
Her focus was entirely social. She was chasing affirmation through relationships, moving really rapidly from one romance to the next.
And what's noteworthy is her consistent disregard for social boundaries. The sources note she would frequently pursue the boyfriends of her own friends.
Which, predictably, led to those friendships collapsing violently.
And when she was confronted about it, the sources described this highly developed, aggressive conflict style. She never ever took responsibility.
Instead, she mastered manipulation. She would create these elaborate, over-the-top emotional performances about how unfairly she had been treated.
She weaponized her emotions. She'd cry, she'd yell, she'd launch into these dramatic monologues until the friends who had been wronged felt guilty.
And they'd end up apologizing to her for misunderstanding the situation or for daring to question her in the first place.
Like a classic example of turning the victim into the aggressor, and it cemented her belief that she could control any situation with an emotional outburst.
And that feeds directly into what you could call the no consequences syndrome.
It does. If Caylee ever got into serious trouble, which was constant, her brother, Lee, would almost inevitably step in to clean up the chaos she created.
And while, family loyalty is understandable, in this house, everyone protected her. George, Cindy, Lee. They did it to avoid dealing with the unpleasant consequences.
So growing up, without ever facing a genuine consequence for her actions, created this profound sense of invincibility.
It solidified the idea that any difficult situation, any debt, any social fallout could just be bypassed or solved by someone in the family stepping in.
The lesson she internalized wasn't don't lie, it was lie better and someone will save you.
And this lesson, unfortunately, it just accelerated her similarity to her father, George. By high school, she was demonstrating what sources unequivocally call pathological lying.
She lied the way other people breathe, even about the most trivial, mundane things you can imagine.
I mean, we're not talking about deep criminal conspiracies yet. We're talking about reflexive, self-serving deception.
The classic, almost comical example that's cited is her denying she'd eaten a bagel while she still had sesame seeds visibly stuck to her lips.
That's lying as a default reflex. It's a mechanism that's totally independent of need or utility.
And the triviality is what makes it so disturbing. It suggests her relationship with truth was completely divorced from reality. Truth was just whatever helped her navigate that immediate micro moment.
This all culminated right at the end of high school with the graduation lie, which I find to be one of the most chilling moments in her youth.
It's a huge one. She essentially stopped attending her senior year, but somehow her parents either remained unaware or were just in active denial.
So when George and Cindy asked about her cap and gown for graduation,
Casey, without missing a beat, told them there was some kind of technical mix-up with the order.
but the truth eventually leaked out. A few days before the ceremony, the school called the parents directly.
And they informed them that Casey had failed due to excessive, non-negotiable absences and would absolutely not be graduating.
So when faced with irrefutable external proof from an authority figure, Casey just doubled down.
She claimed the school was completely mistaken, that she'd actually arranged for extra classes to cover the hours she owed, and that the administration was just confused.
And here is the truly stunning moment of parental enablement.
The entire family, George and Cindy included, still went to the graduation ceremony. They sat through the whole thing.
And when relatives asked why Casey wasn't walking across the stage to get her diploma,
Her parents, George and Cindy, repeated the exact lie Casey had concocted. They told everyone about the administrative mistake and the extra classes.
that is just heartbreaking to analyze. They chose Casey's fictional reality over objective fact, and they participated in that lie publicly to their own family.
If you connect this to the bigger picture, this one episode solidified everything Casey had ever learned about how the world works.
She saw that her parents would not only believe her when the literal truth was staring them in the face,
But that they would actively protect and spread that lie for her. There were zero consequences for failing and zero consequences for this immense deception.
it taught her a crucial destructive lesson. Lying could take her a very, very long way.
And that parental enablement would always prioritize her false reality over external facts. This destructive training ground is the background we have to carry into the next phase of this story.
After her supposed graduation, Casey entered the workforce. She eventually got a job at Universal Studios working for an outside contractor.
Right, taking those photos of guests on the rides. The classic on-ride snapshots.
And in January 2005, at 19 years old, she met a man named Jesse Grund, who worked security there.
And the sources immediately label Casey's behavior in relationships, including this one, as parasitic.
Parasitic, meaning she attached herself to people to fill emotional voids or get immediate practical benefit.
Exactly. Access to a car, housing, social affirmation. She quickly took over every aspect of Jesse's daily life until he reported feeling completely suffocated.
This parasitic nature was then coupled with just an astonishing level of deception around her health.
She lied to Jesse, and critically, she lied to her parents about her pregnancy. She insisted her growing belly was due to water retention or some complex, vague gynecological issues.
This is where I have to pause. Cindy was a registered nurse. She had medical training. How is it possible that a trained medical professional buys a story about 7 months of water retention without demanding a doctor's visit?
That is the pivotal question, and it speaks to the depth of Cindy's resistance to reality. The sources suggest Cindy, the nurse, conveniently ignored her professional knowledge.
Because the alternative, that her unwed daughter was pregnant, conflicted with the perfect family narrative she was so desperate to maintain.
Exactly. She only took Casey to a doctor to figure out the swelling when Casey was already 7 months pregnant. It was a conscious denial that allowed the lie to persist for months.
So when Casey finally admitted she was pregnant, the conflict was immediate and defining.
It was. Casey wanted to give the baby up for adoption after birth. Cindy instantly shut that down.
She insisted adoption was not an option, saying forcefully that they, the grandparents, would raise the baby and help Casey with everything.
This immediately established Cindy as the dominant, controlling figure who would dictate the child's future.
When Caylee Marie was born on August 9, 2005, the details from the delivery room are highly significant.
They really signal that power dynamic shift. Both George and Cindy were there. Witnesses specifically described George standing awkwardly at the foot of the bed, observing the birth from the front row.
But the real symbolic moment came right after the birth, didn't it?
It did. Cindy insisted on holding Caylee first, instead of the baby being handed directly to Casey.
Witnesses interpreted that as the immediate, deliberate transfer of the mother role from Casey to Cindy.
And that was corroborated by the fact that Cindy often referred to Caylee in the following weeks as my baby. She made all the major decisions about the child's schedule, feeding, care.
Casey was basically relegated to the status of an older sister or a secondary caregiver.
That's right. Meanwhile, Jesse Grunn's paternity test came back negative 6 weeks later.
But despite that, he had already bonded so intensely with Caylee and insisted he still wanted to adopt her. He even proposed to Casey on New Year's Eve 2006.
He was ready to take full responsibility, despite the paternity lie. But Cindy had determined that Jesse was a threat to her newfound control.
And at this time, Cindy was facing her own crisis, temporarily separated from George because of his gambling debts and financial deception.
So she became determined to keep Casey and Caylee under her sole, unquestioned control within that family unit.
And she executed this by systematically poisoning Casey against Jesse.
She persistently suggested to Casey that Jesse cared more about the baby than he did about her, playing right into Casey's intense need for personal affirmation and attention.
And Casey, who was always needing an external shoulder and easily manipulated when her ego was involved, eventually broke up with him based on Cindy's interference.
Cindy successfully eliminated the external, grounding male figure in Caylee's life, securing her total control over both mother and child.
And the biological father, to this day, remains a mystery shrouded in Casey's lies.
She gave various imaginary names over time. Most notoriously, Josh, who she claimed died before Caylee turned 2. Josh was almost certainly a complete fabrication.
So while other claims have come up over the years, the identity of the biological father officially remains unknown. It perfectly reflects Casey's overall relationship with truth.
It does.
After Caylee's birth, the child lived with the grandparents, who absolutely doted on her. Caylee was showered with affection and attention, growing up, by all accounts, as a little princess in that household.
But Casey quickly withdrew from the maternal role. She was clearly uninterested in the immense responsibility.
Her withdrawal was really facilitated by this terrible dynamic, wasn't it?
It was. First, Cindy constantly undermined her, consistently telling Casey she was not a good mother, ensuring nothing Casey did would ever be enough in her eyes.
And second, Casey had never chosen motherhood in the first place. She'd been forced to keep a child she wanted to give up for adoption.
That combination gave her the perfect psychological justification to just slip back into her old life, prioritizing her own chaotic social needs and pleasures over parental duties.
And this is the birth of the ghost jobs.
Right. When Casey's maternity leave ended at Universal Studios, she just ignored their calls and was fired. But she didn't tell her parents.
Instead, she created this elaborate deception. She pretended to go back to work every single day.
This was a full-time, structured deception. During the hours she was supposedly at the theme park, she was out shopping, getting her hair and nails done, partying, socializing.
She spent her days entirely away from home and away from Caylee, while the child stayed reliably with the grandparents or various friends who would babysit for free.
And to finance this phantom life, she constantly borrowed money from her parents, claiming she had picked up a second lucrative job at a sporting goods store to explain her need for cash.
It just strains credulity that her parents, especially Cindy, never seriously questioned how Casey, with 2 supposed paychecks, still needed constant loans and never contributed to the household.
It speaks to the level of willful, cultivated blindness that was just endemic to that house. And it allowed the situation to escalate until a critical moment arrived.
A friend named Lauren, who often babysat Caylee for free, needed to reach Casey urgently.
So she called a sporting goods store where Casey claimed to work. The employee who answered was unequivocal. "We don't have anyone named Casey here."
So when Lauren confronted Casey, Casey immediately deployed a fresh batch of lies.
Oh, yeah. They knew her by a different name. It was a mistake. She worked in a different department. But Lauren had reached her limit. She quit babysitting.
George also found out about the job lies around this time, but was quickly shut down by Casey telling him, "Where I work is none of your business."
And George's passivity, once again, allowed Casey to continue her facade completely undisturbed.
The sources really suggest Cindy was the key enabling force here.
Without a doubt. Despite all the red flags, the loans, the non-existent paychecks, the vague job titles, Cindy continued to willingly swallow the story. Her need to maintain the fantasy of a successful, employed daughter was just stronger than her commitment to objective truth.
And that lying reflex quickly morphed into large-scale financial crime.
It did. In 2007, Caylee escalated her ghost life, claiming a promotion to event planner at Universal and inventing fake emails, fake contacts, fake events.
All to justify longer and longer absences. She was truly building an entire imaginary world around her deception.
At the same time, the theft ramped up significantly. She started small, stealing checks and money from her grandmother, Shirley.
And when Shirley found out, Cindy intervened, covering it up and softening the story, preventing any police involvement.
So Caylee, realizing the consequences were always going to be mitigated, moved on to stealing from Cindy directly, using her credit cards without permission.
And claiming her paychecks were delayed because her imaginary boss was away on frequent business trips. And Cindy believed her. Again.
Caylee even routinely emptied George's weekly $30 deposit that was set aside specifically for Caylee's needs.
The scope of her financial crimes became staggering.
She stole from everyone. She even forged fake bank deposit slips to show Cindy, convincing her that money had been replaced or deposited.
And Cindy, relying on these fake slips, proceeded to write bad checks and make purchases, only to discover later the accounts were empty.
Which plunged Cindy into her own financial crisis, entirely caused by Caylee.
The situation reached an absolute breaking point when Caylee stole money from an account of Shirley's that was designated to pay for her husband's nursing home care.
And Shirley was, understandably, absolutely enraged and called for police intervention.
Yet again, that family-enabling mechanism kicks right in. Despite the gravity of stealing money for critical care, Cindy intervened.
She offered to replace the stolen money herself, shutting down Shirley's demand for law enforcement.
This constant parental bailout just prevented Caylee from ever facing the external criminal consequences for what she was doing.
Drowning in debt, George and Cindy finally went to see a financial advisor. And it was there that they discovered this staggering truth.
Caylee had stolen over $40,000 from them, and that was just the amount they could immediately track.
The advisor delivered this stark professional warning. Cut contact with Caylee immediately if you ever hope to recover financially.
But the advice was immediately complicated by the presence of Caylee. The child became the anchor.
It was at this moment that the idea of the grandparents seeking formal legal custody of Caylee first surfaced.
It was an acknowledgement of the fact that they were already the de facto caregivers while Caylee was living this separate, chaotic, fictional life.
And this financial abyss and the discussions about custody that followed, they set the stage for the explosive final argument.
By May 2008, Caylee's focus had shifted to a new relationship. She met a guy named Tony Lazzaro.
Right, at an anything but clothes party, where she gained some minor notoriety for wearing the American flag as an outfit. Tony was the 21-year-old college student and a DJ.
And Tony represented stability, a potential future, so Caylee immediately went into overdrive.
Tony was studying music technology, living a relatively structured life, and he had explicitly told Caylee early on that he would never marry a woman who already had a child.
He also said he wanted sons. The sources noted that Tony later regretted making that statement.
He did.
And Caylee's reaction to this was immediate and manipulative.
Completely. Just 1 week after meeting him on June 2, she introduced Caylee to Tony. The very next day, June 3, she's already lying to her friend Amy Huizenga,
claiming her parents were moving and giving her the house and asking Amy to move in as a roommate.
And by June 11th, despite Tony viewing their relationship as casual, Caylee officially changed her Facebook status to in a relationship with him.
Her lies were escalating at an unbelievable pace. She was creating these fictional realities faster than Tony could even grasp the current one.
And this unstable situation built to a dramatic confrontation on Father's Day, June 15th.
Hey, did you go there, Papa? I know why. But step on Mama, Papa, we're supposed to be in my goal. Papa, we're wait, what? Eat more. I'm done.
Cindy took Caylee to visit her father at the nursing home and then stopped by Shirley's house.
And Shirley, still furious about the stolen nursing home money, just fueled Cindy's existing anger about Caylee's theft, her dishonesty, her general behavior.
So Cindy returned home in a rage. She had also seen recent Facebook photos of Caylee participating in a wet t-shirt contest.
Which was a blatant, undeniable contradiction to Casey's repeated story that she was at work planning important corporate events at Universal.
Neighbors later said the argument was loud and aggressive, noting they often heard Caylee speaking to Cindy in extremely vulgar ways.
So Cindy finally delivered the ultimatum. Spurred on by Shirley's anger and the realization of Casey's public deception, she confronted her.
She told Caylee she was an unfit mother, that she needed to leave the house, and that they, the grandparents, would officially take the child.
The long-standing power dynamic had finally shifted from enabling to absolute control, threatening to remove the very child Caylee had been forced to keep in the first place.
And the next day, June 16th, marks the last known sighting of Caylee.
George claims that around 1 p.m., Caylee left the house, saying she was going to work and dropping Caylee off with the nanny, Zanny.
George strapped Caylee into her car seat, kissed her, and told her he loved her. This was the last time any family member saw Caylee alive.
That same evening, around 8 p.m., security footage shows Caylee and Tony renting 2 movies at a Blockbuster. Caylee is conspicuously not present.
The timeline right after June 16th shows this shocking contrast between the circumstances and Caylee's behavior.
On June 17, cell tower data shows Caylee returning to her parents' house while they were at work.
And her phone goes dark for 3 hours, from 5:23 p.m. to 8:23 p.m. To this day, no one knows exactly what she was doing there during that window.
Later that evening, she's visiting a friend, driving Tony's car, and appears happy, relaxed, and completely carefree.
She was already constructing her ghost life. On June 18, she went back to her parents' house and borrowed a shovel from a neighbor.
Right, around 1:30 in the afternoon. She returned it about an hour later. And the neighbor noted she looked perfectly clean, not distressed, despite the heat.
2 days later, June 20, she's in a hot body contest at a club, photographed having the time of her life, smiling, with no visible trace of worry or distress about her child.
And her parents hadn't seen Caylee since the 16th. When they started asking where the child was, Caylee executed the full fabrication of the Zanny narrative.
The child was with a nanny named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. Caylee claimed she was now living with Zanny because of her long work hours.
When in reality, Caylee was staying with Tony and his roommates partying, and Caylee was just gone.
The deception intensified with every passing day. Every time Cindy asked to see or hear Caylee produced a new, intricate, perfectly timed excuse.
Zanny took her shopping. Zanny had an unexpected family emergency. The child is sleeping and can't be disturbed.
On June 21st, Caylee claimed they were all going on a spontaneous trip to Tampa with Zanny's sister Raquel, and a coworker named Juliette Lewis.
Just inventing names and entire travel itineraries out of thin air. When Cindy asked about clothes for Caylee just dismissed it, claiming Zanny had plenty of clothes for her.
Then came the very odd gas can incident on June 23rd and 24th.
Caylee stole a gas can from George's shed. George, who was highly suspicious of her erratic behavior, confronted her when she snuck back into the house on June 24.
And George threatened to search her car trunk right then and there.
Caylee panicked. She ran ahead of him, opened the trunk, grabbed the gas can, and literally threw it at him, saying, "Here is your damn gas can."
This confrontation confirms Caylee was undeniably at the house on the 24th, engaging in suspicious behavior.
Right, despite having told Cindy she was on a trip to Tampa.
Which brings us to this crucial week before the police got involved, specifically the June 30th confrontation.
Cindy, desperate and increasingly worried, went to Universal Studios after Caylee claimed they were there, only to discover Caylee was nowhere to be found.
And Caylee finally admitted over the phone, "Oh, we're not actually at Universal. We're still in Tampa."
Wait, so if George saw Caylee at the house throwing a gas can at him on the 24th, why was Cindy still treating this as a family secret on the 30th?
Exactly. Why wasn't the police immediately called when Caylee's stories had become so internally contradictory? It proved she was lying about her location while the child was supposedly with a nanny.
It just underscores the deep, pathological familial tolerance for Caylee's unreality. Cindy was still holding on to the narrative that Caylee was just playing a power game to punish them.
Hiding Caylee with Zanny to gain independence. The idea that Caylee was actually harmed was, at that stage, just too terrifying for her to accept.
And calling the police would confirm Caylee's status as a criminal, which Cindy was actively resisting.
Meanwhile, the ghost life continued. While Tony was away in New York, Caylee moved in with her friend Amy and Amy's roommate, maintaining the relentless Zanny excuse.
And in this stunning display of narcissistic pleasure during a crisis, on July 2, Caylee got the infamous Bella Vita tattoo.
meaning beautiful life in Italian, and she proudly showed it off while her daughter had been missing for over 2 weeks.
The contrast between the missing child and that celebratory tattoo is one of the most jarring details in this entire case. It indicates an astonishing level of self-regard and detachment from reality.
She was actively seeking and embracing a beautiful life, precisely during the period when her child's fate was unknown.
Cindy, though worried and actively searching, finally made her concerns public on July 3.
Right. She created a MySpace post saying her granddaughter was missing. She explicitly accused Casey of hiding Caylee out of spite or jealousy and even mentioned Casey's theft.
And analyzing that public post is key. It reveals that Cindy still firmly believed Casey was playing power games, withholding the child as punishment.
Not that she believed Caylee was actually harmed or abducted by some third party.
Exactly. This public escalation was the spark that officially ignited public interest, making the story impossible to contain any longer.
The first week of July saw Casey continuing her financial crimes to maintain her ghost life. On July 8, she drove her friend Amy to the airport.
She was left with Amy's car, found the checkbook, and quickly drained Amy's account by writing numerous checks to herself, forging Amy's signature.
She was running out of external resources and was now just burning her bridges with friends, reflecting this increasing desperation of her financial situation.
A pattern that had been accelerating for years.
The lies finally, irreversibly collapsed on July 15th. George retrieved a certified letter from the tow yard about Casey's abandoned car.
It was registered in Cindy's name and had been sitting there since June 30.
And when George and Cindy went to get the vehicle, the experience was immediate and overwhelming.
The smell hit them right away. Sources describe it as this overpowering, sickening odor, like something dead has been rotting in there.
They initially found a trash bag with a moldy pizza box in the trunk, which they momentarily dismissed as the source.
George drove the car back home with the windows down, but the smell, described as the smell of decomposition, would not dissipate. They also found Caylee's backpack inside, with diapers and a toothbrush.
That same day, Amy and her group returned from Puerto Rico. Amy drove Cindy to Tony's apartment,
where Cindy confronted Casey and practically dragged Casey out.
During this chaos, Amy checked her bank account and realized it was completely empty, drained by Casey's forged checks.
And Cindy, now dealing with the toxic smell, the missing child, and the financial ruin, threatened to call the police about the stolen car if Casey didn't reveal Caylee's location immediately.
And Casey, with terrifying calm, just replied, "Do whatever you want."
This toxic moment resulted in 3 chaotic police calls on July 15th. The first was Cindy reporting the stolen car. The officers were, well, uninterested, treating it as a minor civil issue.
Hello.
Hi, I drove to the police department here on Pershing, but you guys are closed. I need to bring someone into the police department. Can you tell me where the closest one I can come into?
What are you trying to accomplish by bringing them to the station?
I have a 22-year-old person that has grand theft sitting in my auto with me.
So the 22-year-old person stole something?
Yes.
Is this a relative?
Yes.
Where did they steal it from?
My car and also money.
Okay, is this your son?
Daughter.
Okay, so your daughter stole money from your car?
No, my car was stolen. We've retrieved it today. We found out where it was at. I've retrieved it. I've got that, and I've got affidavit from my banking account. I want to bring her in. I want to
Okay,
press charges.
where did all of this happen?
Then Cindy and Casey returned home, where Casey locked herself in her room. Cindy, distraught, demanded to see Caylee and made the second call to 911.
Okay, what's happening?
I have someone here that I need to be arrested in my home.
They're
And
there right
I have
now?
a possible missing child. I have a 3-year-old that's been missing for a month.
A 3-year-old?
Yes.
Have you reported that?
I'm trying to do that now, ma'am.
Okay, what did the person do that you need arrested?
My daughter.
For what?
For stealing an auto and stealing money.
So she stole your vehicle?
Yes.
She said the child was probably missing, but the officers on the recording still sounded unhurried, partly because Cindy herself didn't sound entirely convinced or truly alarmed.
She still thought Casey was just engaged in power games, hiding Caylee in a fit of pique.
But that internal narrative ended when the bomb dropped inside the house. Casey's brother, Lee, finally confronted her, demanding the truth.
And Casey finally admitted it. She said she had left Caylee with Zanny a month earlier, went back, and found them gone.
She claimed she had been conducting her own investigation to find her daughter in bars and clubs for the last 30 days.
And in a convenient last-ditch lie, she claimed she had just received a call confirming Caylee was alive and well.
Cindy was pushed past her breaking point. She made the third critical call to 911, admitting her daughter had finally confessed the child was missing.
And here is the truly shocking, devastating admission Cindy made to the dispatcher over the phone.
She added the detail that Casey's car smells like there has been a dead body in it.
That statement is monumental. It confirms that Cindy, despite all her enabling and all her denial, had already considered the worst possibility.
That decomposition was the source of that smell, despite her continuous efforts to shield Casey from reality.
I called a little bit ago. The deputy sheriff said I found out my granddaughter has been taken. She has been missing for a month. Her mother finally admitted that she's been missing.
Okay, what is
here now?
Okay, what is the address that you're calling from?
4937 Hope Spring Drive. We're talking about a 3-year-old little girl.
4937 what?
Hope Spring, HOPESPRING Drive, Orlando. My daughter finally admitted that the baby's in the store. I need to find her.
Your daughter admitted that the baby is where?
But the babysitter took her a month ago that my daughter's been looking for. I told you my daughter was missing for a month. I just found her today, but I can't find my granddaughter. She just admitted to me that she's been trying to find her herself. There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car.
Okay, what is the 3-year-old's name?
Caylee, Caylee, Anthony.
Caylee Anthony?
Yes.
Okay, is she white, black, or Hispanic?
She's white.
How long has she been missing for?
I have not seen her since the 7th of June.
Is your daughter there?
Yes.
Can I speak with her?
Answer the question. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Hi. Well, can you tell me what's going on a little bit?
I'm sorry?
Can you tell me a little bit what's going on?
My daughter's been missing for the last 31 days.
And you know who has her?
I know who has her. I've tried to contact her. I actually received a phone call today, now from a number that is no longer in service. I did get to speak to my daughter for about a minute.
And you last saw her a month ago?
31 days. It's been 31 days.
Who has her? Do you have a name?
Her name is Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez.
Who is that? Babysitter?
She's been my nanny for about a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Yeah, why are you calling now? Why didn't you call 31 days ago?
I've been looking for her and have gone through other resources to try to find her, which was stupid.
And as this entire dramatic family collapse was unfolding, Casey was also texting Tony.
When Tony questioned why she never told him what she was going through or where Caylee was,
Casey replied with this chilling, self-preserving message. If they do not find her, guess who is going to spend his life in prison?
that single text speaks volumes about Casey's priority structure. In the most dire moment when her daughter was officially confirmed missing to the police, her immediate concern was self-preservation.
Her concern was the possibility of imprisonment for herself, not the safety, location, or well-being of her missing child.
It just demonstrates the total psychological distance she had put between herself and her responsibilities.
So Detective Yuri Meluk was assigned to the case, and Casey immediately launched into her fabricated world.
A world she had spent the last month perfecting. She repeated the Zanny story, claiming she had known Zanny since she was pregnant, and that Zanny had been Caylee's nanny for 2 years.
She provided an astonishing level of specific detail to the detective. An elaborate family tree for Zanny, mothers, siblings, multiple precise addresses, specific roommates.
She was weaving an entire fictional infrastructure. She claimed she met Zanny through Jeff Hopkins.
The reality, which was quickly uncovered, was that Jeff Hopkins was a real person, but only a casual acquaintance from middle school.
They never dated, he never had a child, and he certainly had no nanny connection to Casey. She was weaving a web as she goes, but she was inconsistent.
She was mixing up dates, getting critical facts wrong, even the date of the disappearance, claiming it happened on June 9, despite George having seen Caylee on June 15.
Yet she maintained this performance with incredible confidence.
When Detective Mellich questioned why she had been spending the last month partying, entering contests, and going to clubs while her daughter was supposedly missing.
She offered an almost unbelievable justification. She explained this was part of her own investigation, that she was looking for Zanny and Caylee in nightlife spots, believing Zanny might frequent those places.
That is the ultimate lie of convenience. Her partying wasn't irresponsible behavior, it was dedicated detective work.
The detective quickly checked her employment claims and found that Casey hadn't held a job anywhere since Caylee was born in 2005, a full 3 years.
So he decided to test her lie directly. He took her in an unmarked car to Universal Studios and demanded she show him her office.
At the guard gate, she became highly defensive when security couldn't find her badge or any records. She demanded to speak to a supervisor, claiming their records were chaotic.
But the truly insane moment, the theater of the absurd, happened once they were inside the park.
Accompanied by officers, Casey launched into this brazen theatrical performance. She started greeting employees they passed by name.
Hey, George. How are you, Brenda? How are the kids, Stuart?
She was banking entirely on their awkwardness not to question her in front of the police.
The police watched her maintain this brazen facade, attempting to sell the illusion that she was a well-known, high-level employee.
The employees clearly did not know her, but they politely returned the greetings, which just added fuel to her performance. The police patiently accompanied her until they reached a literal dead end in a hallway where the illusion had nowhere else to go.
At that point, the performance was finally over. Casey turned around, and with total coolness and a smile on her face, she admitted, "Okay, I do not work here."
On July 16, 2008, confronted with the mountain of evidence of her extensive lies, her financial crimes, and her month-long fabricated reality, Casey was formally arrested.
She was arrested for providing false information to law enforcement, and this arrest immediately ignited intense national public interest. And we've reached the conclusion of part 1. We've covered the incredibly toxic family foundation built on control, George's pathological lies, and Casey's years of consequence-free deception.
We've covered the dramatic final argument, the disappearance, and her bizarre, frantic, month-long effort to cover her tracks with these elaborate ghost stories and unrelenting financial crimes.
The information we've reviewed strongly establishes Casey's priorities and her psychological distance from the situation.
Even when faced with the disappearance of her own child and the complete collapse of her decade-long facade, her primary concern, chillingly captured in that text message to Tony, was prison, not her daughter.
What does that single chilling detail tell us about the psychological profile of the person at the very center of this story? That is the question we want to leave you with today.
That is where we leave the case for today. The second part of this deep dive will follow in the next episode.
We'll be covering the immense legal charges that followed the arrest, the immense media scrutiny of the trial itself, and how this case utterly split the nation, turning Casey Anthony into one of the most polarizing figures in modern media history.
To make sure you catch the continuation of this intense, complex story, be sure to subscribe to the channel.
We'll see you for the next deep dive.